The 2017 Champion of Children television program was made possible by United Way of Central Ohio.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ann Fisher, executive producer and host of All Sides with Ann Fisher on 89.7 WOSU Public Media. I'm your host for the 2017 Champion of Children. We have a thoughtful and provocative hour in store for you. First, we'll learn about strengthening the social fabric of our community and why that's important. Then our featured guest, American character actor Ernie Hudson, will share the challenges he faced growing up and the people who made a difference in his life. To close the program, United Way President and CEO Lisa Courtice will present this year's Champion of Children honorees. Before we get started, though, let's hear from someone who isn't with us today, Lou Gossett Jr., who was originally scheduled to be our speaker.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, Columbus, Ohio, the United Way. I love the United Way. I've been with you for years. Whenever you call, I show up. This time I cannot show up. I'm still in the middle of shooting Hampton Leonard here in Georgia. Otherwise, I would be there to share Championship for Children's event. I'd like to think that in my entire life, trying to be a champion for children, including my grandchildren, and I've got a lot of them. I got 9.5 of them that have as my great-grandson. So I can't be here this time. So I promise you, next time you ask, I'll make sure that the calendar is clear. Have a wonderful evening, but I'm with you always. Check my foundation, eracismfoundation.org, and let's all be a champion for children, all children. Teach them how to take this planet up another level. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks to Lou Gossett Jr. for sending that message. We hope we'll have the opportunity to hear from him in person in the future. Now, let's turn our attention to this year's program. United Way of Central Ohio has determined that in order to tackle the issues that matter the most, we must focus our efforts on our neighborhoods, where there's great need and great potential. Champion of Children embraces this neighborhood work as well. It is imperative that we strengthen the social fabric that leads to strong families and vibrant neighborhoods. Here's more.
When we started our program about 15 years ago, it became apparent that children were moving in and out of schools, largely because the family was housing unstable. And what we realized was that mobility is probably one of the least understood, but the most deleterious of all the factors that affect their education. Learning is linear. It goes on a very steady trajectory, particularly reading. And if a child is interrupted in that kind of delivery system, then he tends to fall out. The only national organization that exists in this country is United Way, and it is perfectly aligned with what we do. They are in neighborhood development, they're in education, they're in family stability. That is the work that they're involved in, so it was such a natural relationship.
So when United Way thinks about building social fabric, we think about the constellation of relationships and networks that exist within the neighborhoods where we serve. And so that can be residents, businesses, community-based organizations, schools, or a range of different stakeholders that we interact with. And we really think about each of those relationships as kind of like a square on the community tapestry. You know, ultimately, what we're thinking about as a United Way is how we can weave together those squares, or how we can strengthen the ties that bind those different relationships together. And we've done that in a few different ways. One example that I would give you is the Neighborhood Partnership Grants Program. It's an opportunity for folks within the neighborhoods that we serve to come together, build projects together, and ultimately implement something that will be used to build the social fabric in their communities.
We strongly believe that communities can heal themselves, and transformation does not need to begin with gentrification, and that's why communities need to be a part of any change agent that moves into their area. Over the years that we've been in operation, we've really seen an escalation in the problems that kids and their families have to face. And so it's critical that they get the supportive and mental health services that they need to address these issues. Our Promises program is for survivors of sexual abuse. We always listen to the kids that we serve. And a couple years ago, they came up with an idea because of how frightening it is. They decided at the end of their graduation that they said, we know how scared we were. Can we write letters to the next group to let them know that it's going to be okay? And all of us think we're so smart in this field. We have degrees, we go to college, and it's from these kids that we have one of the most effective components of our program.
If we want children to be healthy, we are going to have to support them in every aspect of their lives, emotionally, physically, mentally, educationally. It takes all of those entities to give a full support, and if any one of those fail, then that is a chance for the child to fall through a hole through which he may not be able to get back.
If you're looking to get involved, there are many different opportunities across Central Ohio to build social fabric. No matter where you live, no matter what your socioeconomic background, there's always a civic association, a school group, a faith group to get involved with.
People often ask us, what can we do to help? I want to get involved, I want to do something. And I think that it differs from individual to individual. But we truly believe that every individual can extend the hand of hope.
Ernie Hudson is a familiar character actor, highly sought after, who has appeared in dozens of films and television roles throughout his lengthy career. He is perhaps best known for his role as Winston Zeddemore in the Ghostbusters film series, HBO's award-winning series Oz, the Law and Order series, and more recently as Jacob, Lily Tomlin's love interest in the hit Netflix series Grace and Frankie. His early years were about as far from Hollywood as you can get. He was born in poverty, reared in a housing project in Benton Harbor, Michigan. His mother died, his father was absent, and he became the toughest kid in school. But a loving grandmother made a difference, and after the Marine Corps and Yale, he began a life of acting and activism that has provided inspiration and hope to countless others. Let's welcome Ernie Hudson.
Thank you.
Columbus is one of the worst places to be born poor in the United States. At the bottom, children at the bottom, fifth of the ladder, 5% of the ladder of the income ladder, I should say, only have about a 5% chance of ever making it into the top fifth by the age of 30. You were raised in poverty. You grew up in Benton Harbor, Michigan. That was a rough town back then. I'm pretty sure folks still struggle there. What was the community like when you were growing up?
Well, I think my mom died when I was 3 months old. I never knew my dad, even though I found him on Ancestry.com recently. But, even though you're poor, or there were times when there was very little to eat, or we would have one thing for dinner, we'd have greens, that was it. But it's about life, You don't feel like you're not a part of it unless there's someone convincing you that you are less than. So it's so important to me as people come into communities to not give that feeling of that you're somehow different than everybody else. I never really felt that way. We just it was life. And I think the thing that I continually remind myself is this life it's a gift, it's very special, and it's all good. We want different things, but the circumstances can't control everything. And knowing that the possibilities and the opportunities would be there, believing that, even though everything around me was saying otherwise, I never felt the despair of it. Was just life. I mean, I knew there were people who had more food, or we didn't have a car, but I just knew that my grandmother would say that we're human beings. There's a greater part of me that I could connect to, and that it was aware of me, so that once the want is there, then it will deliver to you if you just So how was it? It was growing up. It was just fun. People asking about my childhood. I think I had a charmed childhood. You know, I knew I was loved, which is the biggest thing. My grandmother raised me, and there was never a time there's never been a day in my life that I didn't know beyond the shadow of doubt that I am loved. With my grandmother, with my wife now, that's how I feel. And I think that is the most important thing, that to know that no matter what it looks like, you're going to be okay. That's more important than food or clothes or anything. All that's important, but to know that, yeah, we're alike, and you're going to have a great life.
So you had that social fabric in your life.
There were people. There are always people. I think my grandmother was very religious. She would talk about God. There's always people who remind you that you're okay, you're special, and that in the church we went to, there was a brother Cole, and he wasn't a minister or anything. He was, but he was very faithful to the church, and he was just would, from time to time, just do little things that reminded me that it was going to be okay. Certain people in the community or certain organizations would, I remember one year going to camp. We got invited to go to camp, which was like really, really special. My aunts and uncles, my mother had 4 sisters, and they would invite us. They would get me and my brother, and we'd spend a couple weeks with them during the summer. I think that you just need to know that you're loved, and that there are people out there who, who are looking out for you. And it makes all the difference in the world to feel that you're not alone.
Well, I wondered about your reputation as being as being the toughest kid in school. And did that have something to do with maybe a changing of your age? You were growing up and just a normal trajectory?
Well, there's the only thing about my bio that I thought was kind of cool. I was the toughest kid in school. I think not having a dad, even in the projects, most of the kids knew their father, even if their father wasn't there. I really felt outside of. I'd be in groups of people where I felt like they were looking at me, so I think it was very defensive. If you looked at me too hard, it was an excuse for me to defend myself. And it took a long time for me to let go of that judgment and just deal with people as people. I was very defensive. I think when you're African American, anything that goes bad in your life, you can use that as an excuse. Oh, it's because I'm black, huh? And so it's very important to let go. And I think I fought a lot in school because I think it was my way of sort of protecting myself. But what I found out was after a while, the other kids were afraid to play with me. They'd be like jumping rope, and I'd walk over and they'd drop the rope and stare at the ground. And I went back to my 50th reunion, and I thought it couldn't have been that bad. And I asked some of the people there, and they said, no, you were pretty bad. But I think it was my way of just, not feeling, less than or something.
Your grandmother, as you said, was very important to you. What did you call her?
Mom. She was the only mom I ever knew. My mom died when I was 3 months old, so she would say, I'm your mom, your dad, she would, and I think the most important thing that I got from my grandmother is really, sometimes you say things you don't know if it's too complicated to understand or too simple to really, but the thing that she really stressed was that we're human beings, and the greater part of us is being, and that awareness of spirit, that awareness of our greater part, that greater part of us that really knows, and it is aware of us, and it can arrange things if we put into it what we want. I really believed that as a kid. I felt it was just a matter of me deciding what I wanted because there was no doubt that that it could happen. That concept of God as your father, and I would say, Mom, God is everybody's father. She said, but everybody don't know it, and it's so important that you know who you are, because that's the one thing no one can take from you.
You know, because I know people who have all the money you could want, kind of, and have everything material that they want, that don't ever feel.
Yeah, no, money won't do it. There's nothing in the human side is everything we see, everything that's out there, but it's all degrees. You know, no matter, you know, if I buy a new car, it's not the right car. If I buy, it's all degrees of who has and who doesn't have. And that's the human side, but in spirit, we're all one. That's what makes us all brothers and sisters. And I think as you deal with people, you see the spirit. That's what ties us together. That's what we share, and we give to one another, and it grows. So being aware that spirit, anything is possible. But if I have to work and make it happen myself, I mean, you can really work really hard, but there's a limit in terms of where it can go. And nothing is ever ultimately satisfying. The relationship that I share with my wife, like I said, we've been together for 42 years, but it's her spirit. I love her so much, but it's who she is. Now she's this old lady. I mean, we've been together, you know, and but it doesn't matter.
This is being recorded, you know.
Yeah, I know. She is. She's this old lady. I'm an old man, and I kind of go, how did this happen? But it's always, she's who she always was. She's my friend. That's spirit. You know, that's the love. And that is what I think carries you through when the physical part, because I have friends who have a lot of money or a lot of stuff, and I've never met anyone I want to change places with. I think we are so unique and special that I get to be me. I think that's pretty cool. I've never met anybody I'd want to change places with. I mean, you get to live this life so uniquely you, and how cool and special is that? And that's a result of all the generations, all the people who contributed to my being able to live this experience. I just find that really, you know. So, you know, she would say the good news is nobody's better than you. And so you don't have to hang your head to anybody. The bad news is you know better than anybody else. You know, so we're all the children of God, and we should all be accorded that respect.
You raised 2 boys alone.
Yeah.
And I was kind of wondering, you know, you didn't grow up with a dad, so what lessons did you take from your childhood that sort of translated with that?
Well, I think I probably overcompensated. I didn't have a dad. I thought that I knew exactly. I wanted to give them all the things that I wanted someone to give to me. For example, nobody really talked to me about women, so I thought I would say, hey guys, and the kids are so embarrassed by all of that.
Right.
You know, we don't always share the same issues, but I did all the things that I thought a dad should do, you know, starting out as an actor, but I made sure that I was home and, you know, read stories to them at night and tucked them in and always said I love you and did all the things. And you know what I find is that we all have a journey, and they're going to have their lives, and we have some input, but we don't control that. And it's a wonderful experience, but it's their lives. And but I came to peace with the whole father thing through my sons. I have 4 sons, and yeah.
2 with your second boyfriend.
2 with my second one. Yeah.
Right.
So we have 2 boys now.
You know, the social capital issue, the relationships based in trust and reciprocity and shared values, and I was kind of wondering, I suppose you've learned a few lessons about social capital during your years in Hollywood?
Yeah, well, I think Hollywood is an interesting place. I never really, the Bible says, put not your trust in man. My grandmother really stressed the fact that you trust spirit, the greater part of you. And so Hollywood has been an interesting place because I've never really relied on anyone there to build a career. I know that through spirit, someone will always deliver there. And it's so important to be a part of that community and contribute in any way that you can, but a lot of the insanity you just, or at least I, laugh at and give thanks and keep moving. I was working recently on a television show, a young man who I'd known his work, but I hadn't worked with him before. And he was, the two people starring in the show were very unhappy. And I had a great time, but I'm thinking, you know, the money you're making, I mean, this is like really cool, but if you don't want to have a good time, it's okay, because I'm good.
You just reminded me of the Ghostbusters character.
Yeah, no, there's a line in the show says, if there's a steady paycheck in it, I'll believe anything you say. So
right.
That's been the motto of my life. It's like, oh, okay, yeah.
I read an essay you wrote about your disappointment with how the role of Winston came out in the Ghostbusters. I think it was for entertainment.
Entertainment,
Yeah, and the writers and directors cut the part significantly right at the last minute. You had no warning. You said that you learned some lessons in resilience, and I guess that's called surviving Hollywood with a smile or something like that.
I think sometimes you really expect more of people. You think that, but then a lot of things that you don't understand. I think the biggest thing is understanding that we really don't know what's going on with people. We think we do. We think we can judge and analyze people very well, but the truth of the matter is you don't know. Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis were really established stars. I was a new guy coming in. The studio had no obligation to, for example, put me on the poster. When I accepted the movie, I came in right in the beginning of the movie. They cut the part down. All those things were very unsettling, but how do you adjust to that? I mean, you can't control what happens, but you certainly have some input into how you react to what's happening. And it forced me to really remember spirit and to grow up and to love in spite of. And so I'm good.
It kind of changed your trajectory, though. You were shooting for movies pretty steadily, and you decided maybe television.
As an actor and being a single dad and really needing to pay the rent, it was always the belief that once you get into a major movie from a major studio, and if the movie's a big hit, then your life will change. And Ghostbusters came out and it was just the opposite. The work that had been there was suddenly disappeared. But what I found out things about myself. For example, I started doing voiceover work I never did before. I started doing a lot of television stuff that I had never considered doing before. And I find out that life is good. It changes. You know, a lot of times I tell kids, it's like a good video game. You don't want it to be too easy. You know, sometimes we think if I could just do this and this and this and it'll be wonderful. But no, it wouldn't. It needs to be a little challenging. You know, you want to win the game, but you want it to be, and that's kind of what that period in my life, it was like, okay, before I get upset, let me just take a deep breath and let me take this approach. And I think for kids especially, it's going to be confusing and difficult, but that's part of the game. That is life. That's what we enjoy. And when you overcome those things, it's even better than if it's just clear sailing. So that was a difficult time, but I knew that my actions my kids were watching. You know, but I found a lot of times it wasn't so much what I said, it was how I carried myself, and my kids would, I remember going up for parts in those days and being I wanted a job so much and so bad, and I tried so hard, and it was so good, and then somebody else got the part, and then I'd come home, and I was like, and my son would say, Dad, just take a deep breath, it's okay. Rocky, get him a chair, and they pull a chair, and now sit down, breathe, get him some water, and he said, now, okay, what's going on? I said, well, I tried audition. I was the best person for the part, and then they didn't give me the part. And they said, Dad, slow down. And then the little one would say, Dad, it's going to be okay, right? You always said it's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. And I would say, yeah, it's going to be all right. And so I knew that it wasn't just me. I had my sons, And I think that I tell young people, embrace, if you have a child, you're really young. Don't run away from that experience. That is the blessing that you want. I mean, I know that I don't know if I'd be alive without my kids, but it's the best thing ever happened to me. And I think that's one of my ex-wife. I go, and she's very close to them now, but I think that's one of the things that she regrets is to. Sometimes people do things that they think will set you back, but in reality, it was a blessing.
An interviewer in February made the observation to you in this interview that you are often cast as the voice of reason, at least in comparison to the people around you. And I thought that was sort of interesting, and thinking about that vibe about you, so it wasn't the vibe from when you were in junior high and high school and you were the toughest kid in the neighborhood. It was the vibe you got from maybe pre-junior high or post or whatever. And
yeah, well, what I found out was that when I was a little kid, I was really good at fighting, and I kind of enjoyed it. I don't think you could do that now because you'd probably be put away somewhere, but in those days, they were a little bit more tolerant. But I got into a fight, and I found that it hurt me to hurt somebody. Suddenly you become aware that you can't do that. It's not, that connection that we have, I can't. There's an empathy that you become aware, I think when I was a kid, you can go into a blind rage and you can just be all of that. But then there comes a point of maturity when you know that, no, I don't want to see, I'd rather give you what you want than to see you suffer. And because I suffer, we're all in this together.
I'm just wondering, you just, on your, the introduction, you're described as an actor and an activist. And actor, we know you got into at Yale, and the rest is history. When did you start to feel the need to become an activist, and what does that mean?
Well, I'm not sure, where that title of activist, I think there are places where you can make a difference. You talked earlier about do what you can. The Union Rescue Mission in Los Angeles is really important to me. We're shooting downtown Los Angeles, and you go down there, and the number of people living on the streets is just heartbreaking. I don't know how that happens. I just don't know how we as a country allow that to happen. It is what it is, but I think we need to do what we can, whatever that means. It doesn't mean that you're going to change everything. It just means that you did your job. And opportunities come, and you either step up to those opportunities or you don't. But it's clear when you need to reach out, and so that I'm not sure if I answered that question. There's so much going on. I think that we are at a place where as a country, we have to make some big choices. Or we have to accept the fact that this is a choice we made. But we have an opportunity to choose and how we extend ourselves to each other. I really encourage organizations like this to reach out to those citizens who come from our communities, from different communities, because when we're born is a specific time and place. We're part of that. And a lot of people, especially for the African Americans with integration, people moved away from the neighborhoods that they grew up in, that we were kind of restricted at one point. But I think there's a need to reach back to those communities, and but sometimes we're not sure how to do that. And I think an effort should be made to reach out to those people, to come back and let kids see that there were people in the same places they are, and they went on to do wonderful things. There shouldn't be that space where they're not comfortable coming back home, because after a few years, you're not even comfortable visiting your own neighborhood. So,
Do you?
yeah, I try to make a point, but I got to tell you, I was shooting in Chicago. I'm from Benton Harbor, and while we were shooting, I had a second cousin who was killed, was shot. She had just had a baby, getting out of a car, and they said they think somebody was shooting at somebody else, but I didn't go to the funeral because honestly, I didn't know her. I didn't know whatever. I was very close to my aunts and uncles, but once they passed on, I haven't kept contact the way I'd like to say that I have. But life happens. We all get busy, and so that's why I say you do what you can. But it's unfortunate.
A quote in the Champion of Children report struck me particularly. When residents were asked whether people from different walks of life interact in the neighborhood, and if there was a sense of shared values, one reply was, yes, I will meet and interact if opportunity presents itself, but not everyone has similar values. Easier to stay to yourself, less drama.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting thing, and I wondered what you thought about that, and how people are afraid to reach out and take chances, even in their own neighborhood nowadays.
Yeah, no, especially in their own neighborhoods.
There are a lot of transients. That
Yeah.
wasn't the case.
Sure, yeah. I think people easily get terrorized, and I went back to my hometown, and my son was with me, and this guy was coming down the street toward the car, and I locked the doors, and my son thought that was really, he said, Dad, what, are you scared or something? You hit the door lock. That's really unfortunate. We need the connection. We need to be involved, and if you sever that for too long, it's just very, very difficult.
Were you frightened when you said you had a charmed childhood in its way. You didn't have a lot of money, but you were happy, so you weren't afraid to go outside and play.
Oh, no, never. I mean, no. But as I've gotten older, I mean, I moved into, I moved away from not only that neighborhood, but I think part of it is feeling like we need to achieve something and become something. And so if you're not careful, you find yourself living in neighborhoods with people who, my wife and I made a lot of contributions to the kids to the school that my kids went to, but those aren't the schools that I grew up in, or the kids who were from where I'm from. I mean, these were very affluent schools anyway. So, yeah, I think you have to be aware and you have to make an effort. Otherwise, you move away and you become a part of something else.
There's just so much talk about that toxicity of trauma for kids nowadays, that the fear, just the fear of walking outside and afraid.
It's a very different time.
What that does to your brain.
It's a very different time. Yeah. No, I went to, my brother lives in South Central Los Angeles. He cuts my hair. I get with my brother. When I'm in Los Angeles, we meet every Monday. He cuts my hair. We go to breakfast and lunch. But I went a few years ago. I went to see him. And he had to make a couple of runs. He had to go by the post office, and he had to pay a bill or something. So I had to go to the restroom, and there were 3 gas stations on the corner, and none of them would let me use the restroom. We went to the post office, and the ladies waiting on us had a very nasty attitude. We were on the street, and some guy was upset about something, and by the time the day was over, I was so intense, all that energy you carry around defending yourself. And I'd left there and went back to my exclusive little gated area. But you imagine living in that kind of energy all the time. It gets, because you don't know. I don't know if this is, yeah.
What advice do you have for people to reach out and take those kind of risks, to get to know somebody?
Yeah, I think I have to remind myself that I don't know everything. And I have to remind myself too, if I'm just natural, things come naturally, but fear is the first thing that comes up, and you almost have to go, you know what, let me just take a deep breath, and maybe this is not what it appears to be. I was coming through Mexico City. I was working on a movie in Durango, Mexico, and we flew through Mexico City, and they called the guy came up and he asked for the first class to board, and I got up and he said, "Senor, no," and he pushed me out of the way. And so he was calling first class, and I went to go up again. He said, "No," and he pushed me. He wouldn't let me go. And because in my mind, I'm the only black guy here, so I'm looking around. He won't let me. So I said, "Senor," and he just kept ignoring me. And so I held the ticket up in front of his face, and he took the ticket and he looked at it. And then he looked at me and he was so angry, and I don't know why, but I just hugged him. Oh. I hugged him, and he kind of and then he started crying. It was the weirdest thing. He just started crying.
Wow.
And he was apologizing in Spanish, and then he took me on the plane. He got me a blanket and a pillow. And,
they never do that anymore.
Yeah, he was so kind and so apologetic. But I think we're all armed and ready, and sometimes it's just, I'll be the first to give up, and it's finding ways to love, I think, is and remembering that we're all God's children. I know that sounds whatever, but that's who we are in truth. And when I was a kid, somebody coming and giving me a handout and looking down on me, listen, I don't even want it. I'd rather go without eating. Thank you very much. It's knowing that, no, I'm no different than your own kid. And I appreciate you taking the time because you care about me, not because you've thrown me some paper towels and getting back. You know what I'm saying? It's to send that message that I care about you and I care about what happens to you.
I am really sorry, but we have to wrap it up. Thanks to Ernie Hudson for being with us today.
Thank you, guys. Great to be here.
Coming up next, you'll meet the 2017 Champions of Children.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Please welcome the President and CEO of United Way of Central Ohio, Dr. Lisa Courtice.
Who you gonna call? Ghostbusters! If there's something weird and it don't look good, who you gonna call?
Thank you, Ann Fisher and Ernie Hudson. It's an honor for me now to present the 2017 Champion of Children Awards. Each year, we honor a Champion of Children individual and nonprofit organization that have demonstrated exceptional commitment to children's issues. Barbara Seymour is truly a champion of children. Her drive to improve the lives of disadvantaged children and families is her life's work. Barbara designed the Seymour Institute to keep families in their homes and children in their same schools. In 2011, with a growing track record of success of stabilizing families in Florida and in Ohio, Barbara embarked on an ambitious effort to improve the lives of children throughout our country by founding the Seymour Institute to prevent family homelessness and school instability and provide disadvantaged children a greater opportunity to succeed. Today, the Institute promotes two-generation programming that meets the needs of children and adults simultaneously to foster academic success and break the cycle of poverty. The Institute leads this work nationally from Columbus by providing funding and conducting research to inform and enhance the work of partner communities. United Way affiliates across the country oversee the program on a local level, with each community having the ability to design and manage their program to ensure the local needs are being met. The Seymour Family Foundation continues to be the principal benefactor of the Institute and has grown to serve 53 cities across our country. The Seymour Family Foundation makes a significant annual contribution to this work, and to motivate donors throughout the country, they require a match. Last year, the Institute's network of partners supported more than 8,400 children and 8,400 families and 19,000 children. In Columbus, the Institute served 300 families and 700 children. Locally, United Way of Central Ohio oversees the work that is executed by multiple community partners who are working with students and caregivers in South Linden and on the south side. Communities to address health, behavioral, and social factors that lead to instability at home and at school. Barbara's passion to help children extends well beyond the Seymour Institute. Her history of board service includes the Columbus Foundation, Columbus Metropolitan Library, Columbus Museum of Art, and I Know I Can. Congratulations to our hometown hero, and thank you, Barbara Seymour.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you all. This is a wonderful program. He was fabulous. We're at war. Did you know it? We've been at war for 50 years. The war has cost this country $22 billion. I'm not reliable on figures, but that one I know. $22 billion we spent since 1965 to fight a war on poverty. And let me tell you how well we're doing. We started out in 1965 with 180 million people in America, and 20% of those people were living in poverty, 18% of which were children. Today, 52 years later, we have 330 million people. We have 20% of our population living in poverty, and 23% of that number are children. So, you know what? We aren't winning. I do ask myself if that $22 billion had been spent in a different way, a little more intentional way, if things would look different. It's a question we should all be asking ourselves. So, why does it matter? Well, Linda and the Champion of Children have put together a very exhaustive report. It's a fabulous report which informs us of what's happening in Columbus, all throughout Columbus, and it tells us how well children are doing in the third grade proficiency test. It tells us how many and what zip codes about the children are doing, how much mobility is occurring. We have zip codes where 60+% of the children are moving around. Why does it matter? It matters because where there are more than 15% of children moving in a school, 1 in 8, that school across the board, you've read the reports in the dispatch, receive a D or an F. Where the number drops down to 5% of mobility, Upper Arlington, Bexley, New Albany, those schools receive an A or a B. Hardly seems fair, but there it is. We know that children living in poverty are going to probably perform at 35% less than the children in a more advantaged community. That doesn't seem fair either. And so, years ago, my goodness, 1998, when I was at a school in South Linden that had 106% mobility, it became very apparent what the job should be that I should do, because nobody ever talked about it. I never heard about mobility until that time. And as I have become more informed, the more I realize that it's probably one of the single biggest factors in low school performance. It is the single biggest factor in not being able to attain proficiency at the 3rd grade level. And the 3rd grade level is critical because at that point, a child is learning to read, and after that point, they read to learn. And if they can't read to learn, we're going to kiss them goodbye. We're going to kiss them into a life of poverty, perhaps crime, the criminal justice system, or simply a lack of productivity and a lack of successful living that is not really acceptable. It's not conscionable in our time. So we began to work with the Seymour Institute to see what we could do to prevent mobility by stabilizing the whole family. That meant we got 2.8 kids with one unit, and that seemed like a good idea. And so it began to work in Florida and Ohio. And then, as Lisa mentioned, in 2011, we thought, as the recession seemed to be ending across the country, but not at all for the people that we were dealing with, that it was time to take the program across the country. And so we have. So we say, who should we blame and what should we do about it? Don't blame the schools. It's not their fault. It's not the fault of a teacher who has 1 in 5 kids yo-yoing in and out of her classroom all the time, all year long. Kids are coming and going. They're coming in 2 years behind, 3 months behind. Maybe they're way ahead on board, but it's a constant disruption of the classroom. It makes teaching so much more difficult. And so we decided that we would try to see if it's possible to stabilize families with a little financial assistance and a lot of counseling. And so all of our families get a year to 18 months of counseling to help them understand just plain budgeting, which is sometimes a foreign concept, and how they can change the way they're managing their lives. And it seems to work. 98% of the children in families that we work with don't move school, and that means that we have succeeded in our goal. 94% of the families pretty much stay put for as long as we're able to track them. So when people say sometimes, are we making a difference? Well, in 2008, 2009, which was the worst of the recession, Barbara Poppy, who was running Community Shelter Board at that time, estimated that homelessness in Columbus was reduced by 8% rather than growing as was expected. We began to accelerate the program, and more families were able to be helped. There are those who say it's a very expensive project, and it is, but they say, well, we really can't afford that. I will say to you with utmost conviction that we really can't afford not to. We are paying so dearly by not helping our families into successful living, into self-sufficiency and stability. We're paying in lost productivity, we're paying in loss of education, we're paying in court costs. Do you know that Georgia, 15 years ago, built prisons based on the pass rate of the 3rd grade proficiency test? And when they realized what they were doing, at that time they were 5th from the bottom in money spent on education. And they said, we're not going to put up with that anymore, and they made a big change and decided to pay it forward. And now they're 12th from the top in expenditure, and their numbers are vastly different. That $22 billion that I mentioned a little bit ago, perhaps we need to think about how we spend our next $22 billion in the next 20 years and see if we can't do a better job in the future of paying it forward. I think we can do it. Actually, I know we can. It just takes will. I can't thank you enough for this honor. I can't thank Linda and the Champion of Children for putting together the information, the data that informs us so we know exactly what our issues are and what problems we need to deal with, and then put us on a path to addressing those issues. Thank you very much.
Directions for Youth and Families impacts over 8,000 youth and their families each year through mental, emotional, and behavioral health services. The organization is grounded in resiliency-oriented, trauma-informed theory of practice. Through their effective counseling, education, and support programs, Directions for Youth and Families has earned the Champion of Children recognition and a $5,000 grant. The organization is staffed by over 70 licensed clinicians providing services in the home, school, and community sites. Staff are trained to provide counseling on a variety of issues, including abuse, violence, delinquency, anger, gang-related, and drugs. For children and families who find themselves struggling in some of the darkest places, Directions for Youth and Families provides safe places and builds upon the strengths, inspires hope, and promotes healing. In recognition of the expansive and effective reach of Directions for Youth and Families and its steadfast commitment to assisting youth in overcoming challenges and building the skills necessary to lead happy and healthy lives, we are pleased to present the organization with the Champion of Children Award. Accepting the award is its CEO, Duane Casares.
Thank you. At our organization, we truly believe that the true champions of children are our workers who serve on the front line, and we have a video we'd like to share with you that explains why. I admire our staff because the capacity and the strength and the resiliency of our workers is just huge.
It's always been my passion to serve youth, especially with my background and growing up.
When I was younger, I had a social worker who made a positive impact in my life, and I love the fact that I'm able to do that now with this job and this position.
I get to serve a wide range of populations.
I work with the big Latino population.
Kindergarteners through senior year of high school.
They have issues all the way from depression, anxiety. I've worked with several clients who have been suicidal.
Also all over Franklin County, so you get a lot of just different families with different backgrounds.
Programs are important because each youth has different issues, and the programs are built around the issues and the goals that they need to work on.
A lot of the experiences that my clients have faced can make such an impact on who they are, who they become, how they live life.
I deal with clients who have been abused physically, emotionally, sexually.
And being able to provide early intervention and process their grief for whatever they're going through helps set them up for more success later on in life.
Most of our agency is outreach. It's going into the homes, which is pretty much a challenge.
I think you'll get more from a person the more comfortable that they are. So if you're able to meet them in their environment, I think it kind of jumpstarts the services a little bit better.
It eliminates barriers to service for the people that we serve, and they're first.
I am always there at their home whenever they need it. I say, whatever's convenient for you, I can come to you. Or if they have an appointment scheduled with our psychologist, I'll say, hey, I'll pick you up. You're gonna get there because, sometimes they don't have the transportation or they don't have the ability to make it to the bus stop. So it's important for us to be able to come to them and show them that, hey, we will still provide services. We will come to you.
Trainings, we just recently did a grief and loss training. We've done the psychological training, so medication and psychiatry.
I collaborate a lot with probation officers. I go to the court dates to let the courts know the progress that the youth is making.
We've done collaborating with schools, how to help collaborate with parents and how to get them to communicate better with their kids.
The truth of the matter is, to have empathy and work with people is an emotion. And no one has this endless vat of emotions that they can keep giving and giving and expect that not to affect them personally.
It's challenging to walk home and be like, oh my gosh, I just saw that today, or I just watched the cops go over here.
You will have a loss of innocence, and it's not something that we can give back to our workers. You're going to carry that for a while.
That's hard for me because then again, I think about how my client's doing at the end of the night or their family.
Boundaries are what we use to protect clients and protect our workers, and it's also just in the best care of those that we serve.
My biggest challenge when it comes to doing this position in my job would have to be self-care. Sometimes I forget to take care of myself.
I really enjoy working with the youth. Again, unfortunately, some youth will not make it through the program, and that's probably the hardest part, but that also motivates me even more to try harder with the next youth.
That's tough, and it's a hard part of the work that we do, but it is the work that we do. On behalf of all of our workers at our organization and all the workers that do outreach work and serve the people that we all serve, thank you. We appreciate this recognition.
Thanks to each of you for being a champion of children. The generosity of donors to the United Way of Central Ohio this year has resulted in more than $4.5 million invested in children in this community to help them thrive. These investments help children be ready for kindergarten, receive out-of-school support so they can be more successful in school, and help to increase high school graduation rates. We need the leadership and the services of the Seymour Institute and Directions for Youth and Families more than ever. Good night.
The 2017 Champion of Children television program was made possible by United Way of Central Ohio.